My name is Alex Dworjan. I'm an Ansible specialist, and today I'm going to be walking through some enhanced capabilities that you can leverage if you're using the event-driven Ansible notification service that's part of ServiceNow. So what do I mean when I talk about enhancing the event-driven Ansible notification service? So if you've used the event-driven Ansible notification service before, or you've watched one of my videos, you've noticed that there are essentially three tables that I can trigger off of: incidents, problems, and then the catalog itself. The limitation of this is I'm only sending information that exists in that table. So while incidents and problems do have quite a bit of information that's useful to me, the catalog itself doesn't have the actual variables that I populate because those end up in the RITM that is associated with that REQ. So I have to do some data augmentation in order to actually have whether it's the exact rules that I want or the variables that I need to pass to that end job template or workflow. So how can I handle that? So I can essentially create a pre-rule within my rulebook. Yes, it's still part of the rulebook, and I'll show that in a minute, but it allows me to take that initial REQ and the sysid and then go through some API calls to ServiceNow using the ServiceNow.itsm module to add in whatever additional information I need. So mine currently goes through, gets all of the variables that are part of the RITM or multiple RITMs, gathers the user information and gets their email because I use that for tags, and then all gets passed back to the original rulebook and rulebook activation. So I don't add any additional logic into ServiceNow. I'm not adding any additional logic into the job templates or workflows that I have. It's all maintained inside that rulebook itself. So it does streamline, maintain that rules methodology that you expect inside something like Ansible EDA. So again, looking at what it looks like in ServiceNow, the same capabilities apply, the same checkboxes for what tables to monitor and when to monitor them for. All I'm adding in is a rule at the beginning to do that augmentation using one job template that I've created. And then I use the set stats module within the playbook. And then I do post events in the rulebook, which again, I'll show in a second so you'll be able to see that. So let's dive into the demonstration so you can see exactly what that looks like from a change perspective in both the rulebook and playbook itself. Before I jump into the rulebook and playbook itself, I do want to start off with the event that comes specifically from ServiceNow, in this case for a catalog request, to show why I need to leverage this process. So this is the payload that got sent today, because today is December 11th. As you can see, there's quite a large amount of information that came, so I can see that it was approved. I can see the REQ number, but nothing in here includes the actual variables themselves. I don't have the username. Yes, I've got the user ID. I've got the sysid. That's not necessarily helpful if I want to add in the user's email as a tag. I might need to get more information. So that's why I leverage in my rulebook a job template that will start gathering additional information like the actual email address for the user that this was requested for, the RITM that's attached to this sysid. All of that becomes part of my process. So jumping over to the rulebook itself, this is again just a simple webhook, just like you've seen for all my other ServiceNow demonstrations, but this is that kind of first key action. This is only getting triggered on if it's a ST request item, and I have added this in for a sysmod count being 0, aka someone hasn't tried to edit this catalog request in any way, shape, or form, because I populate information back to my catalog requests. I didn't have to add this in, so it didn't trigger itself in a never-ending loop. But all this does then, it's called a job template, which enriches that data, and I'm passing in the sysid for the request as well as the request number, because I use that request number for other things in my automation to provide those updates on later. So let's jump into this job template to see what's actually going on. So this is the playbook that does that job template, and I'm basically using that ServiceNow collection with the API info module to get most of the information that I need, and then it's just a lot of data manipulation. So I'll give credit to Colin McNaughton, who did a lot of the work for this, especially from the data manipulation side to go through some of the JSON payload that ServiceNow returns. He did a great job, but I kind of dove into it and saw how easy it is to add additional data. So especially if you're using ServiceNow, you may know, hey, when I go into a RITM, here are the additional columns that exist. So if I go into one of my existing service catalog items, let me just pick one that I did. I can jump into the RITM that's attached to it, and these are all the fields that are available to me. So I wanted to pick out specific ones like who it was requested for, the number. I could add in the date open to all of that because all of these are available fields, and they just get populated into this columns section. So this is a specific one that I added in because all of my automation leverages for tags for the virtual machines or information that I'm standing up. So I use this to get the RITM record or multiple ones, depending on if there are multiple ones attached to it. So that's something that certainly comes up, that you may have multiple RITMs for a single catalog request. In my case, all of mine just have one, so this is easy to handle. But this does handle the fact that there could be more than one per catalog request. So it does that process. I then also get additional user details. So using the fact that there is a requested for that I asked for, I can use that to get the email column from that user, because again, that's what I leverage for my tags. And then I start going through and actually getting the variables and all their mappings. So what is the variable name as well as what is the variable result? So all of that gets populated in. And then I start creating dictionaries and map everything. And the key piece is at the very end, it's using the set stats module to pass the information back. So this actually gets passed back to the rulebook itself with the enriched event, original event, and the user that I can then leverage in future job templates. How do I know that this is getting passed back? Because in the rulebook, I do specifically have this post events set to true. So any set stat that I use in the playbook that gets called will actually get passed back then to my rulebook to do the future handling. So the good thing is now I can use all of those events. So event.enriched event, RITM details. In this case, I'm getting the catalog item, because this is actually what it's called inside ServiceNow. I can use it then to trigger the specific workflow that exists with the specific variables that come from that RITM. Obviously, you may have to adjust this if you know you have multiple RITM per request. In my case, I know there's only going to be one. That's why I can specifically call out the first item. But I'm doing, again, some data manipulation to select the attribute that is the VM name, the environment, the operating system, and then the hypervisor itself. So all that can get passed in to my workflow. So this really becomes essentially a two-step process now, where the initial request comes in from ServiceNow. It triggers this job template to go through and get additional information, and then the information is passed back to the Ansible rulebook, which then actually launches the workflow itself to do, in my case, my provisioning process. So all of that then will show up in a rule audit. So obviously, I've got a lot of catalog requests coming in, most of which don't cause any additional triggers. But when a trigger is done, I can see that this new multi-provision VM request got triggered right after this one. So you can see it's not a long turnaround time. So it's 22 seconds to go through that process of actually getting in the REQ received and initiating that provision request. So if there are concerns of there's going to be a lot of extra time that it takes to do this, it is a fairly short turnaround, and certainly probably a shorter turnaround than someone manually getting that request, looking at it, and responding to it. So think of all the other things that you might need to relate to, whether it's the incident table information that you want to augment from other pieces of ServiceNow, same thing from the problem table, and obviously same thing from the ServiceNow service catalog. I can reach out to whatever table that you want. So you would just have to update this playbook to go through that process to add in or reach out to additional tables, most likely using that ITSM API info module, and then just adding that into your set stats at the end to pass that back. All of these rulebooks and playbook will be linked in the description down below. So if you want to get your hands on this and modify it for your needs, it will be available to you. So this can be a very helpful starting point. So where can you go next? So I posted the integration walkthrough of getting the event-driven Ansible notification service up and running in the description down below, as well as the direct link to the ServiceNow store for the event-driven Ansible notification service. And then I'm including that role that I've got that it's actually pulling information from ServiceNow for me to get the RITM, the variables, and that end user. That's most likely what you would modify if you need to add in additional capability or additional tables for your augmentation. And then I'm also including that rulebook, so that's what you can leverage to do really that initial pull of information, and then you can add in as many actions after that for the specific catalog items that get requested. So really that first one is just going to be reused for every single different catalog item. I'm just going to add in for each new catalog name that I create a different action and the different variables that are needed for that job template or workflow to handle whatever it needs to do. So thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about how I can enhance some of the information that comes from the event-driven Ansible notification service. Click my picture on the right to subscribe, or click the image on the left to watch another video.